The best of Money Matters. The Big Story.
Welcome to The Big Story. I'm Hongbin Jeong. The clock is ticking as polling day rapidly approaches. With high stakes and the clock ticking, candidates have also turned the intensity up a notch, making quippy back and forth, sharp-tongued rebuttals, and pointed jabs at their opponents. Today, as we enter the midpoint of hustings, we'll be taking a look at some finger-pointing over the past few days and find out what voters might take away from them. Well, joining us today to share more is Dr. Mustafa Izzuddin, who is a senior international affairs analyst at Solaris Strategies Singapore. Hi, Dr. Izzuddin. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me again.
Thank you so much for joining me. Well, Dr. Izzuddin, Prime Minister Lawrence Wong said yesterday at a lunchtime Fullerton rally that a vote for the opposition is a vote to weaken the PAP. Why is PM Wong making these claims that the opposition is seeking more seats without taking on the responsibility of governance?
Well, I think he's just being upfront and making a point that he needs all the best people in his team, and the people are spread across the different constituencies. So there's a reason he's saying that. Having them all on his team would strengthen his government.
Okay. So do you think that PM Wong's warning, resonates with voters who want stability and accountability in Parliament?
I think the traditional message of a vote for the ruling party is a vote for stability will still resonate with segments of the population where pragmatism prevails. So I think that's why the message continues to be mentioned. But at the same time, there is also the clamoring for more diverse voices in Parliament. And this is what the PAP is also trying to do, to say that, look, you can still get diversity with the different ways of getting into Parliament, including the NCMP scheme, the NMP scheme, as well as having the diversity coming from the PAP backbenchers themselves. So they are trying to sell that, and the question is whether the voters will buy that.
Meanwhile, WP, the Workers' Party, has called for voters to, compare its candidates with the ruling party's candidates, backbencher to backbencher. Elsewhere, Jalan Besar GRC candidate for PAR, Cheo Shin Kong, said that more opposition voices in Parliament will force PAP to think harder and be more in touch with the needs of residents on the ground. So, Dr. Izzuddin, why does Mr. Pratam Singh ask voters to compare WP's candidates with PAP backbenchers rather than ministers or office holders? What's he asking voters to rationalize here?
He's doing that because his slate of candidates is not enough to form the government. So to get them to compare backbencher to backbencher is to him a winning formula to get his candidates across the line and win the constituencies they are standing in. And I think that's the political point he's making, as the case that the PAP is making the political point about sticking with the government so that there is stability. So both sides are trying to find what their winnable message is, till these winnable messages that they are putting forward will be able to resonate with the voters. Question is how much of the vote they can get.
Right. Then what are your thoughts on Mr. Kong's statement on forcing the PAP to think harder and, PM Wong's remark about not giving the opposition a so-called free pass to enter Parliament?
Yes, I think you got to prove yourself. You got to work hard. You got to show that you deserve the vote from the voters. You deserve to be in Parliament. So yes, certainly, I think just because you're the opposition does not mean you should get into Parliament. You should be able to prove yourself. In the same way, just because you're part of the work of the ruling party, that you also automatically get into Parliament. It works both ways. So I think it's important for whether you are in the ruling party or in the opposition. You got to prove your worth. You got to prove that you can connect with the voters. You can be their voice in Parliament. And at the end of the day, you are able to convince the voters to vote for you.
Fair enough. Well, Minister and the Prime Minister's office, Indrani Raja, also mentioned that the opposition has been selling the so-called myth that even if more of them are voted in and there are fewer PAP MPs, Singapore will still get the same results. What do you make of this analogy that losing PAP MPs is like pulling members from a high-performing team?
Well, I think that comes from the perspective of the ruling party, because for them, either the political office holders or they perform a complementary role, as I believe Assembly had mentioned. So that's why they want most of their team to be together, getting into Parliament as possible. I think we can understand why they would say that. But at the same time, I think it is important to mention that for the ruling party and for the ruling party is that they, because it's spread across constituents, as I mentioned earlier, each one of these constituents has an important individual that would be part of this part of this team that would lead Singapore forward. So I think that's why he has mentioned that, and I think we can understand from that point of view. But of course, this is a point of view that would be disagreed by the opposition.
But Dr. Izzuddin, how convincing is the claim that opposition MPs lack the experience or skill to govern when opposition candidates have also been, carefully fielded strategically?
I think it is fair to say that over the past couple of elections, that the profile of candidates has certainly become more impressive across the board, particularly with regard to the opposition, where in the past it was a lot more difficult to get them to step forward. So we are seeing interesting profiles, diverse profiles. I think it's a question now is not just having that kind of profile, and whether they are able to resonate with the voters and are able to get their support and that support translating into votes. And of course, subsequently, as the case with the Workers' Party in Parliament previously, on how they would perform in Parliament, then I think it is all about how past performances will determine future seats. And I think that's what's going to happen in this 2025 election. So I think it will depend on how voters have seen the performance of the Workers' Party and also the NCMP from the PSP party. And I think that will determine also how they would vote.
Do you think younger or undecided voters resonate more with the PAP's emphasis on quiet, hardworking leadership, or the opposite?
I think it's going to be a mix. I think it's not easy to pigeonhole the young voter that's all looking at the issues the same way. There's going to be diversity on how they vote. Yeah, and also it is important to mention that just because it is a young, undecided voter that ultimately they would vote for the opposition, and in the same way, it does not mean that they would vote for the ruling party. I think undecided because they want to know till the very end which of the political parties can best represent them. And I think that's not necessarily a bad position to take. And so I think it is incumbent on both the ruling party and the opposition to get as much of the young vote as possible. And I think in several of the constituencies, the young vote are the kingmakers. So the voters of the younger generation has to be taken seriously.
Right. Well, in another political sparring here, Dr. Izzuddin, SDP Chief Chee Soon-juan told voters in Sembawang at a rally over the weekend that if elected into parliament, candidates from the SDP will outdo those from the PAP anytime in managing town councils and raising pertinent issues in parliament. Was he taking an aim at PAP MPs who also hold full-time jobs?
I think no one will put forward the candidate and say they are weaker than the candidate from the other party. So we want to say the best possible, say the best possible things about the candidate they are putting forward. So we can understand why Dr. Chee has said that. I think at the same time, of course, the SDP has that challenge of getting back into parliament. The seats that they held much earlier, I think it's in 1990s or perhaps in 1990 itself, when they held seats in parliament. So it has been a long time since they have won seats in parliament. So certainly he wants to up the ante on the candidates he has been able to put forward, and of course to defend them till the very end.
Well, Mr. Chee also claimed that PAP MPs continue to draw an allowance of about $16,000 a month. Now, this topic has also been very contentious among Singaporeans. But is it warranted? Should politicians be paid well?
I think this is a question again for voters to decide. I mean, there are pros on why politicians are paid the amount that they are, especially when you compare to other countries where they could be excluded. That could include other perks, and also this reasoning that it roots out corruption, right? That we see it take place in other countries as well. So there are pros on why they are paid well, but at the same time, the downside to it as well is whether they can really understand the sentiments of the average person, right? And how much that average person is earning, because there is the concern of the inequality that we see, not just in Singapore, but globally as well. And sometimes that particular divide can weigh in the minds of voters.
Well, still on the SDP here, Dr. Izzuddin, Party Chief Chee Soon-Juan also brought up PAP's recent controversies during the SDP's lunchtime rally speech at UOB Plaza today. Now, these included former Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong's handling of then-Speaker Tan Juan-Jin's affair with a fellow PAP parliamentarian and two ministers' rental of state bungalows at Rideout Road, the government's use of trace-together data, and how it handled the disclosure of individuals' full NRC numbers on a government business portal. Dr. Chee called for Singaporeans to educate ministers that corruption is bad and that if they are caught, there are consequences. Thoughts on this, Dr. Izzuddin?
I think we can see this in the context of where the ruling party would defend its track record and where the opposition would find problems in that track record. And this is exactly how we can see the various issues that are raised by the opposition in terms of how the ruling party has performed in the government. And it is to be expected in an election. It will be a mix of policies and a mix of pushing back on track records, or particularly of the ruling party. So you will see a more in-your-face criticism of the ruling party. But at the same time, that just having voting in protest or just criticizing the ruling party, it's not going to be enough to get the votes necessary to win seats. That is important for political parties, as they have in this particular election, also to put forward what they have as an alternative, what is in their manifesto, and whether that manifesto that they have can be implemented. So voters are sophisticated. They can see through what is practical and what is not. So it is incumbent on all political parties that whatever that they propose, that it can actually be implemented. Otherwise, it will just be said, it will just be all empty talk.
Some great perspective there. Well, in Jalan Kayu, the Income Alliance saga has taken center stage there, with the PAP's choice to field NTUC Secretary General Ng Chee Meng in the single-seat constituency. WP candidate, fresh face Andre Low, and one of its youngest new candidates hit out at his opponent's endorsement of the Income Alliance deal months before it was blocked. And in recent days, the WP has questioned NTUC's support for the alliance deal. So, Dr. Izzuddin, does Mr. Ng's explanation that the Income Alliance sale was proposed in good faith seem credible to voters?
I think that would be difficult to say on how it has been received by the voting population at this point in time. But I think what is important is that Mr. Ng Chee Meng has not chosen to deflect it, but at least talk about it during his rally speech and talk about the position that he has taken and what the entire episode was about and how it has eventually been resolved or been addressed and of course subsequently resolved. So it's important for him to address that. And also I think has been done by other colleagues by others in government as well regarding this particular episode. I think it has been brought up because it is felt that there is a clamoring for more information to be known, and I think that is why it is being brought up. And also this feels, particularly from the opposition perspective, that this could be a political strategy to win votes. So that's why I think it's being brought up. So I think we can see it continue to fester until the very end on the 3rd of May. And perhaps even after that, this is still being brought up again.
Okay. Also then, how convincing is Mr. Ng's response to criticisms about political insulation, despite perceptions of NTUC's close ties to the PAP?
I think this has been a long-standing debate come criticism about the relationship of the tripartite relationship that we have in Singapore. We've seen that in past elections as well, and I think we'll see that again in subsequent elections. It's not something that's going to go away. I think it's incumbent on the ruling party, the PAP, to defend it as they have on why it's good for Singapore, and for the opposition to say otherwise. And we've seen that in this election as well. I think as far as Jalan Kayu, I just want to make that point as well. It is, of course, Mr. Ng Chee Meng, who was previously minister, and, of course, LTC Secretary General, so a high-profile figure, against the Workers' Party, a relatively unknown person, but a young person, very vibrant as well. So, and also, of course, the branding of it being WP. So it's certainly promises. Of course, Jalan Kayu has quite a considerable young population as well. So it promises to be quite an intense fight here. And I will have to see how that pans out. But of course, remember, Mr. Ng Chee Meng is also a seasoned campaigner. He has campaign, and I think that campaign experience would also be important. Because ultimately, it's not just about what speeches you give, but it's about how you are able to walk the ground. So which of those two candidates are able to do that more successfully is the one that's able to responsible. It's the one that's going to win in Jalan Kayu.
Well, do voters then see the government's eventual reversal of the deal as proof of accountability or as a sign of flawed judgment by the leadership?
But again, it's difficult to tell at this point in time. So I think there will be mixed opinions on how it has been explained. And like I said, perhaps the issue is going to fester. The question is whether that particular issue that has been brought up is enough to sway the minds of voters, or are there other issues that are perhaps more important to them, issues that are perhaps more personal to the voter and affects them directly.
And to wrap up our conversation here, Dr. Izzuddin, another major talking point over the last few days has been about, raising GST from 7% to 9%. Yeah. I mean, the WP, PSP, and the Singapore Democratic Party, they're calling for a rollback to 7% or less to alleviate, the cost of, or elevate the cost of living pressures here. Are voters willing to vote for an opposition that might make changes to the GST hike, or is this too simple of a reason to make?
I mean, theoretically speaking, if you hear that and you're a voter that you're going to pay less GST, of course, that's going to ring well with you. And then that would be the obvious reaction. But if you probe deeper, then the question is, if you want to reduce the GST, then and you're going to pay for whatever programs that you have to roll out, the money would have to come from elsewhere. So it's a question of how are you going to balance the books, how are you going to roll out the budget, and whether GST is the way to do it, or perhaps is there an alternative. And this is why I think it is important to probe deeper as to why it has been raised and whether by reducing it, what effects it would have. So certainly, or in first glance, it looks good, but it has to be look at it a lot deeper than it is.
Right. Well, that was a great conversation with you, Dr. Izzuddin. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much again for having me.
Thank you. That was Dr. Mustafa Izzuddin, Senior International Affairs Analyst at Solaris Strategies Singapore. This has been The Big Story with me, Hongbin Jeong.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.